Bob Foulkes, our guest, he's written a book called Adventures with Knives, Surviving 1,000 Hours of Culinary School, and he did survive it. He's a former corporate guy, a political guy, who spent 6 months, 125 days, who's counting, on an adventure. It's a great Father's Day gift because, as you say, there's many men who retire and they're not inspired. They have no idea what they want to do next. They're not sure who they are anymore because they don't have that job or that recognition, and they're driving their wives crazy. You see, you don't have a wife to drive crazy, but a lot of men who come home, who haven't been home, drive the women, some of the women who have been home, crazy.
Well, I could say that I actually drove her crazy already, so now I was going to drive other people
so
crazy.
now she's gone.
I need other people to drive crazy. But I think men do have a problem. You know, we're identified by this business card. I was a corporate guy. I wore a suit and tie to work.
Petrocan.
Yeah, I was an
big
oil man.
Up there.
And I had to re-identify myself. And there's no book that says, you know, go read this book and you could kind of do something completely different. And we're living longer, we're healthier, we have more money, we have disposable income, and we hit this wall and we say, what am I going to do?
Sure.
So,
what is my passion?
Yeah, and normally the men that I was talking to said, well, I'm going to play golf and I'm going to travel. Well, that works for maybe 6 months, and then you've got to decide that there are some things that you want to do. I chose cooking school because it was going to be interesting, because it was going to fill my life for 6 months, because I knew that I loved to eat. You know, there's a classic line in the Julia Child, Meryl Streep movie where her husband asks her what she's going to do when she is in Paris. And she's, well, I love to eat. And I thought, I like that. You know, I love to eat.
Yeah.
So maybe I can cook instead of just going to restaurants. So it wasn't really a plan. I sort of fell into it. And I didn't realize I was putting myself in danger by, or that I was going to have such a great adventure.
Exactly. Casey Stengel said the trick is growing up without growing old.
Exactly. And surrounding yourself with young people, trying to do something completely different can be great fun. And surrounding yourself with people who have a passion and being able to take from that passion. I mean, the chefs at the school were incredible people. They are professional chefs. They're not just chefs who didn't make it somewhere else. I mean, Chef Patrice had Café de Paris, and he was trained at the Savoy, I think. Exactly.
So these are chefs who have been in the trenches and now choose to teach.
Yes. And to call someone a chef is to give them a position of great reverence, and I certainly would call myself an aspiring cook, but I would never attach my name to the word chef.
I know,
That would be misleading.
I called you a chef, but I could have said wannabe chef, but I thought after 1,000 hours of school, I could at least call you a mini chef or something like that. Now, when you carved up your first hind of beef, and I assume you have to do that.
We did a whole hip of beef.
Hip of beef.
Yep, the whole hind quarter. It was great fun. We had saws and knives. You know, we didn't have hammers or anything like that, but we really went at it. And it was
How does it change the way you talk to the butcher now? Now that you know something about where the flank steak really comes from?
Well, the whole process was a process of learning all kinds of little things, and you know, cooking and becoming a chef is a cumulative experience. These people start outside the kitchen peeling potatoes until they get it right, doing salads until they're so tired of greenery they'll never eat it again, making desserts, and then they kind of work their way up, and if they're lucky they become a chef. If they're lucky they open their own restaurant and don't you know, fall apart after a year.
Right, if they're funded well and they know about costing and all of that. But in your case, I'm suspecting that you probably dressed your salads before this adventure out of a bottle.
I was a craft dressings guy. Every once in a while I would shift to a different flavor, but I usually had 2 or 3.
Thousand Island?
Thousand Island was a mainstay, and you know, I used to get into some of the exotic flavors, but Thousand Islands was a good start. And you know, I was a pretty sophisticated guy. When I had people over for dinner, I would not put the bottle on the table. I would kind of put it into a little dish or something like that. And I've stopped doing that. One of the great things about all of this is that you learn how to cook from scratch.
Yeah, and you made your first vinaigrette. Big day.
Big day, big day. You chop up some shallots. You mix some shallots with a little bit of vinegar. You put a little mustard in it, put a little salt and pepper in it, put some oil in it, whisk it up. Who knew?
Exactly. Well, you knew there was such a thing as a shallot. You just didn't know what a staple it was in a French kitchen, in any kitchen.
Well, there weren't a lot of shallots in our family kitchen back in Taber, Alberta, so it was new to me, and the whole vegetable section was a bit of an exploration for
My
me.
granny would say, go pull an onion out of the garden.
Bingo. That's exactly
And I'll
right.
cook it for 8 hours, because they did.
Exactly.
Because something could be wrong with that onion. You never know.
You never know.
Back to days when you thought, you know, this was a really dumb idea. You're in school, you're tired, you don't have much of a social life because you've decided to become a professional cook. Was there a day when you thought, I've lost my mind?
Oh yeah, I mean, every adventure in my view has a sweet spot and a black hole, and you know, the sweet spots I can tell you about, but the black holes were pretty dark and they were pretty deep. I would come out of there with all of these young kids, and they would change out of their clothes and they would go off and party, and I would drag my sad, sorry butt home. The long walk, and a kitchen is a very energetic, crazy place.
Sure.
I couldn't believe it. I always considered myself to have a mild case of ADD. I liked a lot of action, and kitchen certainly satisfied that, and a lot of danger. Kitchen certainly satisfied that. I always believed that most of my wounds were self-inflicted, and certainly in the kitchen, you know, that's where it happened.
Sure, I'm sure you had a few disasters. You must have.
Horrible stuff. Had to throw stuff out.
The
Chef would look
brioche
at you.
story, we'll save that for somebody who buys the book. But when you burn the brioche, you're at your station, you're doing it all right, a disaster. How were your grades?
Well, let's just say that in the middle of the class, in the middle of the course, I thought I was at the bottom of the class. By the end, I got most improved student. And I don't know whether that was a compliment or
not.
a statement on how
So
far
bad
I'd
at the
come.
beginning.
Exactly.
You could only go up.
Exactly. The guy who could separate an egg and call it a success. But it was a wonderful experience. And Chef Patrice, for example, an incredible guy, years of experience.
Yeah.
His whole career, he made the perfect peppercorn sauce. He was known throughout Vancouver. He took a whole bunch of apprentices through his kitchen who are now famous around Vancouver. And he now slowly, carefully brings along a whole next generation of
For sure.
chefs. and
Well, you know, Chef Tim
managers.
comes here a lot. And I
Yes.
know he's a flashy dresser.
Well, I
That's for
described him
sure.
as an apprentice Mississippi riverboat gambler. He dressed very well.
And he knows a lot about food and a lot about finding food and cooking and running a magnificent school, all of that. So Adventures with Knives, surviving 1,000 hours of culinary school, a pleasure. I
Thank
look
you.
forward to our next dinner.
I look forward
Little
to it
creme
too.
brulee. You make a
Perfect.
good creme brulee.
Thank you.
It's better than that rhubarb.